Welcome to Green and Red, Scrappy Politics for Scrappy People, a regular podcast on radical environmental and anti-capitalist politics, brought to you by Bob Bazanko and Scott Parkin.
Welcome to the silky smooth sounds of the Green and Red podcast with another Scrappy Sunday. Your co-host Scott Parkin in Berkeley, California. And as always, I am joined by
Bob Bazanko, and happy Scrappy Easter.
Oh, yeah, it's Easter. I totally forgot that today is Scrappy Easter Sunday.
And we're going to celebrate Jesus as a revolutionary who threw over the tables at the money changers and things like that, right?
We have a special video queued up for Jesus today.
Jesus was a socialist.
Yeah, exactly.
He was almost as famous and important as Donald Trump.
Yeah, Trump falls into a sort of pantheon of historical figures which have been persecuted by states and deep states, if you will, like Jesus. You know, that reminds me, maybe we should just kick off with this, is that there's a video this week. One of the big news stories this week is that Trump was indicted.
Indicated.
Indicated. Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out. And so, kind of like last week, we didn't really have that much where we wanted to say about Trump, the details of that or anything like that. But we do like to kind of poke fun at some of the commentary. And so the commentary around Trump's indication, as he put out on Truth Social, he was indicated by the villainous DA of New York. People were comparing him to Eugene Debs, saying that he would be running a jailhouse presidential campaign similar to what Debs did. Well, this week at the where the grand jury indicted him in New York, there was protests outside, including a protest by Marjorie Taylor Greene, who joined the protest and had a lot of off-color comments about New York, because apparently New York doesn't like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't like New York. But we'll skip that for today. But I do want to play this one video that of an interview she did with some right-wing website.
President Trump is joining some of the most incredible people in history being arrested today. Nelson Mandela was arrested, served time in prison. Jesus was arrested and murdered by the Roman government. There have been many people throughout history that have been arrested and persecuted by radical, corrupt governments. And it's beginning today in New York City. And I just can't believe it's happening, but I'll always support him. He's done nothing wrong.
So there we have it, folks. From the lips of Marjorie Taylor Greene, we have how Trump is in a historical pantheon, which includes Nelson Mandela and Jesus. She didn't throw in Martin Luther King or Gandhi or anything like that, but
because she would have supported Mandela and the ANC, right?
Yeah, she was I'm sure she was a big supporter.
She was probably doing those shanty towns on campus at the time, getting arrested to stop apartheid.
I'm sure she protested a bunch of banks that were funding the apartheid regime. But just the commentary, I like that. It's amazing that this person gets actually so much media attention. It's amazing that Trump gets so much media attention, but he's at least a showman. He sort of has cultivated that for years. But now, the media has just flocked to Marjorie Taylor Greene. She actually did an interview on 60 Minutes this week where she called President Biden and the Democratic Party the party of pedophiles and groomers, which I would say we're not fans of Biden and the administration, but also she made these accusations without any real pushback or questioning of it by Leslie Saul. And I think the real problem here is that mainstream media platforms people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who makes ludicrous comments like what we just see in this right-wing interview about comparing Trump to Jesus, and then says this other stuff on 60 Minutes on mainstream media, on one of the top news magazines of television news magazines of the media sphere.
Yeah, I've noticed there are some people who you call on the left who are kind of defending that, there's free speech and all that. And I get that. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you have to give everybody, this kind of absurd, platform like they gave to her. And if you wanted to call her out on it, that'd be one thing. I mean, there's a lot, if you want to talk about pedophiles and groomers, I mean, you should be talking about the clergy, right?
Catholic Church.
Yeah, the Catholic Church. So but I mean, it's clickbait. It gets hits. And I think, media is such a spectacle, especially, in the last 6-7 years because of Trump. And even something mainstream like CBS has to play along with that and look for those kinds of, kind of spectacular things. I think the spectacle, the old Guy Debord argument, the society of the spectacle from the 60s, French Marxist, really is valuable. It's kind of a Gramscian thing that he kind of takes up to date. And I would certainly encourage, if you're not familiar with it, check it out. You can get a PDF online. But that's clearly what we're living in right now, the spectacle. Everybody has to be more and more outrageous and say more outrageous things. And it plays. We're trying to left media is the same way. We've talked about that. And so anyway, that's Jesus, Mandela, and Donald Trump. So Kiki Friedman once wrote a book called Elvis, Jesus, and Coca-Cola. And I keep thinking about that. Jesus, Mandela, and Trump.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Moving on, maybe we could talk a little bit about some this week in history, because I actually think there's a pretty significant figure who has a birthday this week who's much more important than Donald Trump.
The first thing I want to bring up, and this is something, my entire career, I've been in radio and podcasts for a long time, and I've often done these kind of a this day in history, radical history kind of thing, and I think it's useful. It's kind of fun. And so we have a few today, but I want to start with April 9th, 1898, Paul Robeson was born. I suspect most people listening here are somewhat familiar with Robeson. He was a brilliant scholar. He was, I believe, valedictorian at Rutgers, All-American football player, went to law school at Columbia, was told because he was Black, he would not be, he'd be doing research, he wouldn't really be a high-profile lawyer. He also had an amazing voice, could sing like nobody you've ever heard, deep bass, started singing kind of old Negro spirituals from the plantation days and other songs, became perhaps the best paid artist up there. He was up there with like Sinatra in the 40s, made $300,000-$400,000 a year. But he was also very politically opinionated. And at the end of World War II, during the early years of the Cold War, when African Americans here in the United States were saying, hey, we need civil rights. We just fought this epic battle against the Nazis. And Robeson came out and said, if there's another war, if there's a war against the Soviet Union, Black Americans should not fight. African Americans should not fight in a war for a country that treats them like this. And as you can imagine, all hell broke loose. He was hauled before HUAC, the House of Americans Activity Committee, where he really made them look foolish because he's so much smarter than all these people. But then they brought out the other person, probably the only African American at that point, who was maybe more famous than him, Jackie Robinson, to kind of repudiate him. Although the riff was, I think, been exaggerated. They kind of each knew where they were coming from. And I think Robinson and Robeson actually got along. At that point, the government went after Paul Robeson, I think, as viciously as any political dissident. They took his passport away for, I forget, close to a decade. I believe it's the longest anyone's ever had a passport. But the worst part is he mentally, he just had a hard time with it, and it really kind of drove him mad. And his career fell apart. He was down to he couldn't play, he was blacklisted. He was making a few $1,000s a year. But Robeson really is just, I think, one of the most important activists of any type, certainly kind of that celebrity activist in American history. He was on Broadway, he was in movies, but he never quit. He spoke dozens of languages, he's just an incredibly bright guy, but he never backed down from his political commitment to justice and peace. And, I think it's worth reckoning with, somebody worth mentioning and knowing. Probably the biggest book, the best book on him still is by Martin Duberman, a biography written probably 20 years ago now. Huge book, but really great biography of Robeson. So happy birthday, Paul Robeson. And, let's hopefully more people can learn about what he did and follow in his lead.
Yeah. And just kind of going along with this week in history, we have a couple of these. The next one chronologically is it was this week, actually on April 8th. that, April 6th, that little Bobby Hutton was assassinated by the police in Oakland, California. Little Bobby was a member of the Black Panther Party. He was actually the first person to join the party at the age of 15 or 16. The other Panthers, the founders, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, actually made him get permission from his mom to join before he could join. He was the first treasurer, and then he was also the first member to be assassinated by the racist police in Oakland. And he was if you note the date, it's just like 2 days after the assassination of Martin Luther King, and there was like such outrage. He was part of an action or an attempted action against the Oakland police that led to him getting killed. And so, rest in power, little Bobby.
That's what's remarkable too. So he was 17 years old. Fred Hampton was only 19. These guys were so sharp at such a young age. They really kind of had it down. They had this broad analysis, really kind of intelligent and comprehensive. So yeah, rest in power, Bobby Hutton.
And then the last one is the April 8th which is this weekend is the final episode of the last episode of All in the Family.
Yeah. We was it last year or in 2021? We did the best political movies and TV shows of all time, and All in the Family was in our Hall of Fame. It really was path breaking. It dealt with issues of race and gender. It took on issues like sexual assault and just a really incredible show. I think when I think of that too, and I know it's kind of passe to say this now, but would they be able to do a show like that today, right? Because it was out there. Some of the themes were really out there, and some of the language was pretty rough. And I don't want to start getting into this kind of anti-woke victimization kind of thing, but I do think it's worth thinking about that. Sometimes when people get offended by something that's said or done, they lose sight of the bigger picture. All in the Family was really a progressive show that really put a lot of messages out there that you probably wouldn't get otherwise. And so looking at it in terms of some of the stuff that they said that was off color or maybe insensitive, you lose sight of the fact that in the bigger level, this was really an important cultural phenomenon. And so I think we should all be a little more tolerant and understanding that people may sometimes say things that we don't like, but in the bigger picture, is really important. I mean, Archie Bunker was a foil, right? He was a symptom of something much bigger. I always tell my classes, Archie Bunker probably supported Kennedy, probably voted for Kennedy, may have voted for LBJ, probably didn't have any strong opinions in the early days of the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement. But, over time, especially when you start to see the Black Power movement, or when you start to see kind of Nixon start talking about law and order and all that, Archie Bunker probably flipped. And he became a big fan of Richard Nixon, this kind of working class, white, guy who's, paying high taxes. He's living in New York. And so it really is a prototype, I think, of something that was going on at the time. And Norman Lear and the writers were really sharp in the way they portrayed that.
Yeah, and I think it definitely surfaced issues around race and class and the war in Vietnam and politics of the day, which was much more than you saw on other sitcoms at the time. I would say it's more than you see on sitcoms today. In many ways, but I actually feel like the sort of centerpiece of that show is around class, and it's like this white working class guy and his opinions on all the change that is happening around him. It's a fascinating study. Yeah. And it's a stellar cast, which all became like really big deals after that, and it was an important show. I growing up, when I like sort of came of age, I sort of like at the sort of end of the All in the Family era, I was more a fan in the last couple of seasons because I was pretty young when it first started.
Right. Yeah, I mean, pop culture is important. We do a lot of stuff on that. So I salute to All in the Family. There's really never been anything like it after that. So anyway, so what's on your mind this week? What do you feel scrappy about? Anything pissing you off?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about, there's like kind of like three stories, which have been the three big stories of the week, I would say, in a lot of the media in which I've been following. And so, the one are these, and I think we have a lot to say about this, but it's these, expulsions from the Tennessee legislature, which happened this week. There was a mass school shooting last week, I guess, in Nashville, where the 6 people, including 3 kids, 3 9-year-olds, were killed at a Christian school in Nashville. And so one thing we see movement-wise is, there's often when school shootings like that happen, there's like nationwide school walkouts. They were definitely organizing walkouts across Tennessee in response to this, because, Tennessee, I don't know how many states you can say this about, but I feel like every time there's a mass shooting in a red state, they're like, they have some of the loosest gun laws in the country. But it's a race to the bottom.
Yeah, Tennessee is, I was going to say it's kind of a late entry into this Texas versus Florida competition for most moonbat right-wing state.
And so, 1,000 students protested outside the Tennessee legislature, which is controlled by a supermajority. It's something like 69-25 in the Tennessee legislature. But students also protested inside, where there was altercations with, Tennessee state troopers. 3 Democratic members of the legislature also joined the protest, one of which, Justin Jones, had actually been arrested before he was elected to the legislature and banned from the legislature for protests inside the Tennessee legislature. But the Tennessee GOP retaliated against Representatives Justin Jones, Justin Pearson, and Gloria Johnson, and expelled Reps Justin Jones and Justin Rep, and attempted to expel the 3rd Rep protesting Gloria Johnson. Interesting difference here is that the Justins, Reps Jones and Pearson, are both young Black men, like Gen Z age Black men, where Representative Gloria Johnson is actually a 60-year-old white lady, and she only dodged expulsion by 1 vote, but still, it's interesting optics, though.
Yeah, it is. The optics are definitely obvious, but at the same time, I mean, it's most people want to get rid of her too. So I don't want to let Tennessee off the hook by saying, "Oh, they're more than racist." They're way beyond just racist. So that's my point. Yeah.
Well, the other thing about Tennessee is they've attempted to ban drag shows and make them a felony in the state of Tennessee, but they do nothing to ban the automatic weapons and guns.
But the ban on drag shows is working, right? These kids were killed by an AR-15, not by a bow and high heels. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. Good point.
No drag queens have killed kids in Tennessee. So damn it, it must be working.
The other thing here is it's something that's been big on the news. It's been trending on Twitter, and then the response from the National Democratic Party and the leaders in the leaders, quote unquote, in the National Democratic Party have been, it's just, I don't think they know anything other than to roll over and play dead at this point. And it's been it's just amazing how much they don't fight.
Yeah, I mean, the Tennessee response is predictable. Actually, the removal of those 3 isn't that shocking. I think, to me, the big story, as always, is we have to kind of deal with our own community, and the response has just been pathetic. I mean, Biden basically said nothing I can do until Senate acts on it, and Obama put out this pathetic tweet, it's time for civility and this is not nice, kind of shit. And hopefully the kids will just keep the pressure up. I mean, this is it's going to take months and months of constant protest daily, teachers walking out, kids walking out, What's surprising me is that, you would think at some point this is so outrageous and insane. I mean, a lot of people in the country music world, Jason Isbell, Mickey Guyton, people that have spoken out against it. You would think that somebody, the Tennessee business, or at least the Nashville business community, would step in and say, "Hey, well, guys, reel it back a bit," but no. And I think, again, what we've always said, and we've talked about this a lot, is the Democrats need to put pressure on these people, because they're pathetic. But you can create these kinds of these fractures and these fissures that we often talk about. And if you just sit there and scold them, and like with Obama, who's just absolutely tepid and pathetic, and I don't know, Biden hasn't really done anything. They should be shrieking about Tennessee right now. And instead, Biden's throwing billions around Ukraine and ratcheting up tensions with China. And he, spanked Bibi Netanyahu by saying, "Don't, be a good guy," kind of nothing. He refuses to even let the International Court of Justice take on the case of Palestine. So, I mean, this is really kind of, we keep coming back to this, right? That, in the absence of the Democrats doing anything, it's just a lot harder.
Yeah, and I would say that I think this is a little bit of my critique of social media, is they think Obama tweets and therefore he said something, he's acted. It's not really acting. It's like putting out an opinion on Twitter, and it's not, it's not warfare. It's not political hardball.
Why aren't he and Michelle in Tennessee at the State House getting arrested, right? And Pelosi and all these people. They're, I mean, in the old 60s, derisive term, limousine liberals. I mean, that's what they are. I call them Hamptons liberals now. I like that a little better.
Trump is in New York getting indicated. Yeah. In the pantheon with Nelson Mandela and Jesus Christ. Right. So where are the Obamas and where are the Bidens and where are the Clintons?
Well, and I mean, Obama, I mean, they won't even comment on that. And, you see this media, it's like, this is a big step. This is dangerous. Like, the whole thing is based on fear, right? By the way, what happened to that civil war that was imminent, right? They guaranteed it, right? And, Marjorie Taylor Greene was the highlight of the New York protest. I mean, Trump is dangerous, absolutely. And he could bring the crazies out, absolutely. But at the same time, I think a lot of people are starting to, kind of get tired of his antics too. I know the Republican Party they're freaking out at this point because he sucks up so much oxygen. And a lot of the big money people are starting to say, hey, we can't do anything until this is straightened out. Yeah. So he may be the only person Biden can be, because Biden, again, I've been saying this for 2-3 weeks, but I hate to make age jokes, but he really is. I mean, I'm not saying as a joke. He's really not up to it. He's really not. And I think they should have a draft for Gretchen Whitmer or somebody else I'm going to talk about later. I have a surprise candidate that I want to propose.
Bob's going to unveil his surprise candidate by the end of the show, by the end of Scrappy Easter Sunday.
By 2020, at the end, I want a draft movement for this candidate in 2024. Right.
Let's talk about these two other races real quick.
Chicago and Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You want to start?
Yeah. So I think the quicker one will be just Wisconsin. They had a special election for the state Supreme Court. State Supreme Court has been in the hands of the Republicans, like a sort of hard right Wisconsin Supreme Court for something like the last 15 years since Obama. It was a response to Obama. It was the Tea Party election. And through that, the Republicans have done all this gerrymandering. They've done all this rolling back of voting rights. They introduced right to work laws in Wisconsin, and the Democrats have been pretty hapless in the face of that. They have been doing a lot of organizing. We have a Democratic governor. For some reason, the Democrats didn't get together to beat Ron Johnson last year.
Well, the National Party didn't do much for Barnes, Mandela Barnes.
Yeah, right? They didn't support. They played defense on the seats they held. But then now this Supreme Court justice race is sort of apparently a bit of a game changer. It's going to swing the state Supreme Court back to a 4-3 liberal majority, where and part of it is a response that the Republicans want to have a 1849 abortion law on the books. And I think that was too much, because I'm not going to be able to pronounce her name, Janet Protasiewicz. The new state Supreme Court justice basically won decisively.
55-45.
Even though most people can't pronounce her name, like me. And so the Republicans in Wisconsin are freaking out because the gerrymandering is both within the federal elections, but it's why they actually have a control of they've controlled the state legislature and the state senate for so long. And so we could potentially see some of that gerrymandering undone, and that could be like a real game changer. Many people often say that Wisconsin is a laboratory for democracy. I think that's a little bit of a liberal smoking some hashish, but
maybe when Bob LaFollette was live, but
John Nichols says it a lot, but it's definitely freaking the Republicans out that they will have, Wisconsin will be less of a purple state, and so
they've
kind of threatened to
impeach this woman before she's ever been sworn in.
Yeah,
And see, but you know, they're insane, but you got to give them credit, right? Because they don't mess around. Like, more stories about Clarence Thomas have come out. Like, anybody's shocked by the fact that he's taking money from people who have business before the court. He's just a vile, you know, useless piece of garbage, right? But what happens? You know, one Democrat, you know, anonymously said, well, we'd like to go after it, but, you know, the Supreme Court already has no credibility. It's like, yeah, so destroy it. Like, what is this fetish about the court, the Supreme Court? We can't go after this. Like, Americans have less faith in the Supreme Court than, like, even the police, I think, right? It's like at the bottom.
Or the president.
Or the president, right? You know what's number one on that list? Professors. See? Because look at me, I'm the kind of guy, like, you know, you kind of believe, right? It's just that look of earnestness on my face.
It's a very reputable job.
It's a reputable profession, right? Being
it's more reputable than a U.S. Supreme Court justice.
Well, hell yeah, you know. But except when I'm teaching CRT or whatever. So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they've gone after already. But yeah, I mean, and I think the important message here is when you stick to core issues like gun control or gun laws or like abortion rights, or, you know, well, they're not going to talk about healthcare, right? But when you stick to that, you actually do quite well, right? The Democrats are famous for hiding their new symbol, like I say, I've been saying, is going to be a possum rather than a jackass, rather than the donkey, because possum just like plays dead and surrenders, right?
Possum caught in the garage. That possum you catch in the garage, it just lays down dead.
That's the Democratic Party, right? But when you do take an aggressive approach on these issues, you do way better, right?
Which is what Prasewicz did, apparently. So
yeah. I mean, and especially abortion rights. I mean, that's, you know, in key constituencies, you know, like suburban women and other groups like that. You know, I hate talking about electoral politics because you and I have always said, like, that's not enough. But at the same time, you know, it is a tactic, and it is one of the arenas in which this stuff plays out. And so, you know, I would much rather have her on the Supreme Court than some Ron Johnson crazy, you know.
Daniel Kelly was the guy who basically said he won't concede because we are now faced with the rule of not the rule of law, but the rule of Janet. I should have downloaded that clip too, but I didn't.
I mean, and that wasn't even close.
I thought he was going to cry. He probably went home and cried after that.
No, there was also good news in Chicago, right? Relatively so. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. I think you followed this more than I did.
Yeah, there was two big races last Tuesday, one of which was in Wisconsin, the other was in Chicago, the Chicago mayoral race. That was a much tighter race. People on the ground in Charlotte were very nervous, but Brandon Johnson, let's go Brandon. Sadly,
that's what those flags are for. I had no idea.
I saw too many of those memes after he
so
won.
So the same people who were like Trump 2024 also supported Brandon Johnson. That's weird, you know, ballot sharing, isn't it?
Yeah. It's all this left-right merger is going on. Yeah. It's hard to make sense of it.
Jimmy Dore must be thrilled.
Yeah, Matt Taibbi.
Yeah.
No, but Brandon Johnson, who was a middle school teacher, and I believe he was a city councilman, and he was a union organizer here. He was out of the Chicago Teachers Union, ran against Paul Vallis, who was the former CEO of the Chicago schools, who was, you know, he did a lot of privatization, did a lot of support of charter schools and private schools in Chicago. I believe he was Rahm's boy.
Well, I was just going to say that Chicago was kind of like, in many ways, the ground zero for the charter school movement. Arnie Duncan was from Chicago. Rahm Emanuel,
who endorsed Vallis,
right? Obama, right? I mean, if you look at charter schools, that's clearly bipartisan. You know, we'll get back to that in a minute. You know, Texas yesterday, the Texas House voted down a proposal that Abbott loved in order to give money to private schools, to vouchers, like really. Because rural Republicans in Texas said, "Oh, hell no!" So
yeah, I saw that. It's
good to see this attack on that. But at any rate, in Chicago, Vallis had been, I think, in charge of the New Orleans charter schools too. Didn't he like destroy the public school system in New Orleans? I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, they were calling him a Republican in disguise. Did Lori Lightfoot support him too, or?
So Lightfoot definitely opposed Brandon, and I believe she endorsed. I could be wrong. People can correct me in the comments, but I believe she endorsed Vallis. Also Betsy DeVos endorsed Vallis.
Yeah.
And so it was the establishment and this sort of austerity hawk neoliberal wing of the Democrats and the Republicans. There's less Republicans in the city of Chicago, but that's who supported Alice, and of course the police unions.
Yeah, yeah, he ran one of those standard like tough on crime campaigns that was like devoid of any reality, right? Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, kind of endorsed him and tried to help him out of Alice.
There were threats that I believe it was from the president of the police union were saying that like they expect 800 to 1,000 police officers to resign immediately after.
Bye-bye. See ya.
After if Brandon Johnson won.
Those guys are such freaking snowflakes. They're going to give up their pensions. And come on, break the overtime, the pensions. They're not going to do shit.
Yeah.
I think, and it was closer, but it really, it wasn't like, a razor thin margin. He won like by 3 points, I think. It wasn't like 51.5 to 48.5 or something like that. It was a victory. Absolutely. I think, what we were talking about earlier too, because Mel King died, was it last week or the week before? Mel King was a candidate. He was a councilman in Boston, He was the first major party Black candidate for mayor of Boston back in the 80s, I think. And, there was a generation there where you had people like Mel King, Harvey Gantt in Charlotte, and of course, Harold Washington in Chicago, who won, who kind of came out of a more progressive activist tradition. And so it's also kind of important. I think Johnson really speaks to that more than, because a lot of, African-American candidates today don't come out of that tradition. And I think like Eric Adams in New York, who's a cop, right? Who's just gutting like public school budgets and parks and libraries and things like that to give the police billions and, billion in overtime. And even Lightfoot was really, ostensibly horrible. And so it's Johnson is, I think, a little more of a throwback. And, remember, you had Harold Washington, Jesse Jackson came out of Chicago. So, Chicago has a far, pretty impressive radical tradition. I'm not saying Brandon Johnson is that. A lot of people, I see a lot of lefties are upset because he's apparently supporting Israel. But I think that's you just take that for granted, unfortunately, and, Chicago doesn't really have a foreign policy per se. But Democrats aren't going to speak out about that. They're just not, unless you're like Rashida Tlaib, there's a few, but
Ilhan Omar.
Yeah, but all things considered, as bad as Dallas is, sure, you're glad to see Brandon Johnson win. Now, we'll see what happens. The police are obviously going to make life very difficult on him. But it would be nice if it would be nice if 1,000 retired. You can save that money.
I assume that the San Francisco Police Department made Chase Boudin's tenure as the San Francisco DA like pretty untenable, and he did a lot of criminal justice reform. They didn't like that. Same thing in Philly, I believe, with Larry Krasner. They're both district attorneys, but still, it could be very similar if the Chicago police decide to sort of. It'd be good if they just retired, but I suspect what they'll do is try and just sabotage the city, because that's what they do. Because if they don't get their way, they just crack down.
I think the Chicago teachers is also, a group worth studying too, because they've been, pretty assertive. Teachers are kind of generally, teachers and nurses are pretty badass over the last 5-6 years.
When did they have that big Chicago teacher strike? I think it was 2012.
Yeah, it was a while ago. With this was the CTA, the Chicago Teachers, the CTA, I think it's called, right? The Chicago Teachers and
CTU, I think.
CTU, yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it's, in terms of like labor activism, it's quite good. And like I said, the teachers, the nurses in 2020, so there are these kind of activist labor groups out there.
What a lot of my organizer friends in Chicago were saying is that the sort of roots for Johnson's candidacy really laid in that first 2012 CTU strike.
Okay.
That they did after that, they decided to organize Build Power, and led to ultimately this, where one of their own has been elected mayor.
Yeah. Well, the woman who led that strike, I can't remember her name now, was actually kind of getting ready to run, and then I believe she had a cancer or something like that. So
I remember that. This
has been in the works for a while, and it's good to see. So hopefully, Chicago's a tough place right now. They're losing a lot of people. The cost of living is really high there. A lot of people just can't afford utilities. So there's a lot to do, and of course, the police are really hardcore crackdown, and a lot of money going to the police budget. I forget. A couple of years ago, I forget what they spent. Well, the Laquan McDonald case, right? I can't remember how much the city paid out to victims of police violence. Just like hundreds of millions of dollars, just an incredible amount that comes from the public dole, right? So anyway.
And I believe they have a cop city, or they have a proposed cop city in Chicago, similar to what's being built in Atlanta. And then also there was a scandal with the Chicago Police Department where they had a dark site where they
let's look that young guy, kid they killed, right? Laquan McDonald. He just brutalized them. They have a dark site. They're doing, basically special ops. It's a paramilitary force. I mean, if another country saw this, they would probably refer to the Chicago death squads, like we talk about that in Latin America, the death squads. Well, that's kind of what we're talking about here. These paramilitary, the extrajudicial murders and kidnappings and things like that.
Yeah. And then you want to talk about your top candidate for the Democratic nomination in 2024. So why don't you lay that on us?
Continuing a theme that I believe Green and Red has taken the lead on. We have talked about this, and I genuinely mean this. I'm not, we joke a lot, but I really don't know of any left media that has talked about this as much as we have. In the past, you have heard me speak well of the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, right? And so I am today throwing my endorsement, the vaunted Green and Red Bozanko endorsement, to Mark Milley, who should run for president in 2024, right? And if you think I'm kidding, I mean, Trump, Biden, right? Harris, Pence, Buttigieg, DeSantis, like really, we spoke at some length in 2020 about the role that Milley was playing in challenging Trump. Remember, Trump kind of set Milley up for that photo op at the church, which was just horrific. And Milley kind of really, went off after that. And this is something I know a bit about too. I've been studying this really my entire career. So when it comes to things like civil military relations, or what I call military dissent, I actually know a fair amount about it, right? And so Milley fits clearly within that framework of people like, maybe not Smedley Butler and David Shoup, but clearly he's fairly thoughtful. And in 2020, remember, he came out, he was studying coups and how they're done, and realized that, without the military, you really can't do that, which is what you and I were saying that whole time, right? All these crazies are just fascist, coup. And we're saying, like, no, that was very bad, right? But that's not going to happen. And clearly, I think Milley, and along with like Wall Street and Jamie Dimon, was really important in that. Milley has spoken out because, now the Republicans are talking about how woke the military is, which is just slightly preposterous. But
West Point's teaching wokeness.
Yeah. Milley.
That's what Matt Gaetz says that often.
Because Gaetz is a real tough
guy. And Ted Cruz.
Yeah, tough guys who would be, I'm sure they'd be on the front lines. I wouldn't be surprised if both of them are volunteering in Ukraine soon.
Yeah.
Cruz and Gaetz, with the George Lincoln Rockwell Brigade, and that'll be their Lincoln Brigade.
You saw the George. you saw how much time they served in Iraq and Afghanistan, right?
Yeah. Well, one of them was grilling Milley about a year or two ago about this, and it was really, Milley said, "I'm a 62-year-old white guy, a significant percentage of the armed forces is non-white. 40% of the armed forces is non-white. So I don't know what that's like." He said, "I got to be open to learning about it." And so he spoke with real power and thoughtfulness about, kind of the role of understanding, racial diversity and things like that in the U.S. It was kind of liberal, nice stuff. But the guy's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But what's really my most recent, surge for the Milley candidacy came because a few months ago, while, the U.S. is continuing to double down in Ukraine, Milley said this is going to have to end with talks, with negotiations, because no one's going to win. No one's, it's just becoming this bloodbath. And so Milley, I think, was really the first kind of establishment figure in that regard, active duty chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to say that. And it's kind of been buried, right? But I mean, they're attacking China for saying the same thing. They're attacking China for these peace overtures. Mark Milley said that a few months ago. And then this week, Milley came out and made me very happy, because I've been talking a lot about this lately, saying, it's time to cool things off regarding China. You need to bring it down, take it down several notches. China hasn't done anything yet, that would warrant this kind of aggression. Its war is not imminent. And again, you're not hearing anybody say that, So Mark Milley, and I think, how many times I have to say, I mean, the military is not an ally of people on the left. And I think we're both aware of what the military industrial complex is about. And, you know, when Milley retires, he may very well go work for Raytheon or General Dynamics. I would, you know, I mean, many do, so that wouldn't be shocking. But Milley does, I think, represent that kind of old line that you see. And in my studies on Vietnam, I saw that. That was kind of a fairly common view, right? Even though they were trying to kill Kennedy, you know, because, you know, he wasn't aggressive enough, that's, you know, they were advocating policies that were like not going into Vietnam and ratcheting down tensions and things like that. And I think Milley fits within that framework. So as somebody who studied this a lot, I really kind of, I like, you know, whenever Milley says something, I listen to it and I read, you know, if he testifies in Congress, I'll read the reports. And I think, you know, again, there are, you know, the ruling class is not this monolithic homogenous thing, and a lot of people on the left think it is. And the military, and when, you know, I recently had an interview with Henry on Fortress on a Hill, and we talked about this. And there are really, I think, significant differences even in the military ranks. You have crazies like Flynn, right, who's, you know, batshit oath keeper, proud boy, who should be at Vietnam, right, you know. But then you also have people like Milley, and in the past you had people like Anthony Zinni and, you know, David Shoup and Harold K. Johnson, and, you know, going back to
Shinseki, right?
Eric Shinseki. Yeah, there's a significant, and I mean, at some point these guys are, you know, you have to understand that they're the ones who are going to have to see their people fight. And, you know, Americans aren't going to go fight in Ukraine. You know, that's why the U.S. isn't opposed to this war. And you don't really see any action against it because there aren't Americans there. And a war against China is just abominable. I mean, actually, that would just be horrific. And I think Milley understands that way more than these, you know, kind of dime store cowboys like Biden and Blinken and all these other people do who've never done anything. You know, they like to talk tough. What's her name? Ruland, you know, and
Victoria Nuland,
yeah, people like that. And so anyway, if Milley, if you need a hand, if you need a campaign manager, hit me up. I've got $100 bill that Oliver Stone never claimed. I would gladly donate it. It'll be the first contribution to the draft Milley movement, right? Having said that, I still would prefer Gretchen Whitmer if the Democrats were going to ditch Biden, which they surely should. A new poll, did you see that today? I think only like a third of Democrats said Biden should run again. And overall, and that says something, right? 20, what is it? It's like, it's not single digits, but I think it's less than 20% of Americans think that Biden and Trump should be running, right? So, and yet this is where we are, right? This is democracy in America. I was talking about, I was teaching C. Wright Mills and SDS this week, and it's just so applicable, right? It's the same shit today in 2023, right?
Yeah, in the 21st century, we have these throwbacks to the 20th century.
Well,
one who was master of the Senate, the other who was master of jerking himself off in the business world in New York and New Jersey.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the power elite, right? This is what we have, and it's not democratic. I mean, no one's choosing that they run for president, right? Yep. I mean, they're up there, and the Democrats are too afraid to get rid of Biden. You know, the other day, you know how Facebook puts up like on this date several years ago, and one of the things they put up was a poll. I put this up in 2019, and there was a poll in 2019 showing how Bernie Sanders and others would run. And in 2019, this is before COVID, when Trump claimed he was, you know, popular and, you know, the economy is the greatest evidence, strongest economy, and Bernie Sanders is running for president, right? And and Bernie Sanders is ahead, 48-40. And the Democrats said, we can't run Bernie Sanders. You can't win. I'm ahead 48-40. I'm coming to you today to tell you I'm ahead 48-40. And the Democrats said, no, we can't run Bernie Sanders, right? Because you have to do the Trump. I can't do the Trump. But, you know, so this is what the Democrats, they can't ditch, you know, they can't ditch Biden. That's why I think we should get together a unity campaign, maybe. Mark Milley and Lynn Cheney, right? That's in the Democrats were right. Their favorite crazy conservative is Lynn Cheney, right? So anyway.
Sadly she's the moderate Republican now compared to on the spectrum of crazy.
I mean, her father was an intelligent version of Trump. Really, that's all. I mean, Dick Cheney was more dangerous, really, because he's not insane and he's not, you know, an adult, you know,
he was not the most
addicted.
He was not the most amazing president or vice president ever, though, Bob. Just so you know,
Mike Pence was, right?
Well, no, he was, but now he's not.
Well, you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think, is probably, I would say she's the betting favorite to become the vice president, right? She's the leader in the clubhouse.
Yeah, right. But I would actually wager money that that's what she's gunning for.
I don't think she's hiding it.
Yeah. I know you had one other thing you want to touch on. I was going to say one other thing too, kind of related to something we talked about last week, which is war on left sort of groups or politics or ideology. Last week we talked about food, not bombs, and this is not a happy note. In Houston, being targeted by the city of Houston, it's led to lawsuits, but people do food sharing. There's a mass movement that came out of the 80s, out of the anti-nuclear movement called Food Not Bombs. It's very anarchist run. Lots of anarchist organizers actually come up through Food Not Bombs. I did a lot of Food Not Bomb stuff in Houston back in the day. And so in Houston, the city of Houston is actually trying to, get rid of them. In Reno, Nevada this week at the, I think the chapter is called the Biggest Little Food Not Bombs chapter. There was tragedy where a crazed right-winger actually plowed his car into a food sharing spot in Reno, killing one homeless woman and injuring two of the Food Not Bombs activist organizers. And I just want to say that, there's governments, there's where city or state or federal governments are targeting activists, but then we also have this sort of like right-wing movement, which is also targeting the left. And so this guy basically, when the police pulled him over, he stopped and he admitted that he had intentionally run into them aiming to hurt people. And it's murder, and it's terrible and tragic, and it's also a new reality that we have to live with. Mm-hmm. Similarly, the other thing I wanted to kind of note is that it also, I saw an article on The Intercept this week about, and we just did a show on the FBI infiltrating racial justice movements in Denver, Colorado, and Colorado Springs. Awesome show, epic show with Trevor Aronson. It's now emerged that the state police have their own intelligence gathering service, and they are actually surveilling, gathering data, probably infiltrating who knows what else, students who are protesting gun violence in Colorado. If you remember, a few months ago, there was a pretty tragic shooting at a gay club in Colorado Springs. And, state police, FBI, they are not watching these neo-Nazis who publish that they're going to do this on their websites. But instead they're watching teenage activists, and a lot of the activists who were infiltrated in the Alphabet Boys, the story we did with Trevor Aronson, those are all young people too, like YDSA, Young Democratic Socialists of America. Those aren't people who are like Bob and I. They don't have gray hair. It's probably high schoolers and college age people. And so I just want to say that we're dealing with extrajudicial murder from the right, and then we're also dealing with the state, whether it's the state government or the federal government, surveilling and trying to disrupt our movements. And so it's just, this war on the left continues. Hopefully, everyone should keep that in mind, but continue to organize, be as transparent as possible, and fight back.
And Colorado is kind of a blue state, it's not, we're not talking about like the real crazies like Florida or Texas.
We're not talking about Tennessee,
And I suspect that's going to happen in Tennessee. These kids are going to be under the microscope, and they're going to be surveilled, and they're going to get threats, and their parents are going to get, intimidated and all that kind of stuff. So, it's, the kids, you saw what the kids could do in the summer of 2020. They were out there, and I think, look at the lives they've had. They've endured 9/11 and 2 economic crashes and a pandemic and global warming and the destruction of the healthcare system and student debt. So a lot of them probably figure, hey, what do we got to lose? And guns. Every day. And when I show, I talk about the Cold War, and I show duck and cover in class, which is preposterous, right? But it's kind of ridiculous when you're hiding under a desk and stuff. These kids do active shooter drills all the time now, which has got to be traumatic. And so, I think these kids really are kind of, I hope they continue to be pissed off and continue to go out there and jam this up.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of impressive right now. But that's what surveillance, groups do. They go after the left. So that's why, I don't get that upset when they go after the Proud Boys, because they're going to come after our people no matter what. So if they want to like take a little detour and get rid of these folks, that's, it's what they do. I don't think me encouraging them to go after the Proud Boys is going to help them. I don't think they really give a shit what you and I think, right? Or what anybody on the left. That's what these lefties who support Taibbi are like, you don't understand. It's equivalent. Like, no, it's not. They're going to do what they do no matter what.
Yeah.
And so it's my cigar, my Easter cigar, right? I also have one on Ash Wednesday. This is how atheists celebrate Ash Wednesday, by the way.
Good Friday.
You smoke a cigar. No, Ash Wednesday,
Yeah.
You're not Catholic. I should have put the cross on my forehead, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so there's that. It's a pretty week. The last thing I was going to say, and this is just short and brief, because this is something we've talked about a lot too, and I think we need to do a whole show on this. You've heard both of us go on and on and on quite a bit about conspiracy theory on the left. And especially, we've done a lot of stuff with the JFK conspiracy theory. I said we're kind of really a part of that debate now. And we're not on the majority side. I think even among the left now, people are really into that. And so today, there's this new journal called Compact Magazine, which is this weird hybrid of like Catholic, kind of old social democrat. It's a weird group, but at any rate, in the newest issue, they have two conspiracy theory articles. One is that Nixon was taken down by the deep state, and Trump, and this one was, I forget who did that one. And then Christian Parenti wrote one about how Trump is being indicted. It's political indictment from Alvin Bragg because he too was not imperial enough. He was an anti-imperial president, right? That's insane. And people on the left who support that, I've never been, this is apostasy, I know, but I've never been all that impressed with either of the Parentis, Michael Parenti or Christian Parenti. They've done some good work. I'm familiar with both of them. But, if you're going to read somebody on the left, you can find people, I think, who are more astute than that. But Christian Parenti has, kind of gone all in a lot of these conspiracies now. And the idea that Trump is somehow, a peacenik, any more than Kennedy was, or that he was an anti-imperialist is preposterous. He ramped up military spending, slammed the Tomahawk missile into Syria. He's continued, he didn't pull out of Syria or Afghanistan. He's continued to strangle Cuba, really ramp that up, given more money than ever to Israel, supported Saudi. So Donald Trump, we can say, we could probably make a case that he's not as bad as Hillary would have been. I have no issue with that at all. And this isn't to say that, Obama wasn't a war criminal and Biden, isn't a war criminal. All that's true. But Donald Trump is not an anti-imperialist any more than Putin or Assad or anti-imperialist. And so you do have this batshit crazy left out there. And we've talked about this before too. And so this conspiracy theory fascination, I don't get it. You don't need that. I mean, conspiracy theories imply that there's the deep state actors, right? They're going after Nixon, which is preposterous, right? They're going after Trump. And that implies that like these guys are trying to do something good and that there's good guys, right? And so you have the deep state who are the bad guys. And obviously, if they're trying to do this and, because they don't like policy, that implies that policy is being made by people who are decent or whatever. I don't know what the hell they're thinking, and, we've had our, and that's preposterous, right? You have an oligarchy, you have a ruling class, and they don't have to go into these like, underground bunkers to come up with plots. This is just the way it's run, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I honestly think that most of what is like conspiracy is like things you read about in the newspaper, and so therefore it's just policy, or it's just the machinations of corporate America, or how the federal government is working, and the people on the left and the right, they do this too, is they want to subscribe some deep-seated, smoke-filled room sort of, whispering. And I do think that there's like wealthy people who sit around and make plans about things. I just don't think it's that hidden like that. No, and occasionally, we get a hot mic, or occasionally, someone wears a mic when Mitt Romney talks about the 43% or whatever it is that he said that time. But like, this is policy. This is like business practices. This is not conspiracy. This is what I find confusing about the Oliver Stone conspiracy industrial complex is that most of what happened actually is documented. And if you look at the documents, then it's it's easy to see who was doing what. If there's a conspiracy around a deep state related to Vietnam, Kennedy was part of it, right? And so it wasn't a deep state. It was just policy. It's how the government works. It's like working with the CIA and the FBI and the Pentagon. Anyway.
I'm not sure. And Nixon, what was Nixon? Why would he piss them off, right? I mean, they tried, and Nixon was personally despised for a long time, but, and that may have had something to do with it. But the reality is, in the 70s, what Nixon did was considered outrageous. Today, nobody would blink, right? And I mean, Trump
probably did what Nixon did like 50 times over.
Yeah, I mean, but, in terms of like, Trump, I don't get this, he tightened sanctions against Venezuela, against Cuba, against Iran. He gutted the Iranian nuclear agreement. Just because
bombed the shit out of the Taliban,
bombed the shit out of droned. Just because he's criticized the war in Ukraine, it doesn't mean anything, right? And so this really is preposterous. And left, there are smart people out there who buy into this shit, and it's really frustrating.
I never really want to use these two words together very much, but Trump was astute enough when he ran for president in 2016 to criticize the forever wars, the wars in the Middle East. Yeah. But he also, helped keep them going. Like he didn't actually end the war in Afghanistan. I mean, Biden ended the war in Afghanistan. And
and the whole thing about was it political to go after Trump? Sure, why not? But the reality is the guy's committed a lot of crimes. I get it that taking Trump down is different. They could go after everybody, but they're not, right? They could go after Clarence Thomas, but they're not. Trump, in addition, and he's just destabilizing. We've talked about this many times before, right? He just upsets the equilibrium of the entire country, of our whole society. Yeah. And clearly they see that as a threat. I mean, it's because of Trump that you had 20, 25 million people in the streets, right? I mean, that was clearly, George Floyd precipitated, absolutely, and this was a long simmering thing. But I don't think if Trump hadn't been president, you wouldn't have seen anything that big happen, right?
No, he egged it on, to be honest.
Oh, absolutely. He threw gasoline on it, and this was an accumulation of his approach to COVID, the immigration, his just rhetoric, his tweeting, and everything else. So in that regard, was it a targeted indictment? Yeah, probably, but it's not like he didn't do anything either. I think the ones in Georgia, maybe if something comes down there. I've given up on merit gelding in the federal government. The idea that Trump is somehow a victim is just insane. This guy weaponized the Justice Department, for 4 years. And so, Kristen Parenti, all these people, Mate, Greenwald, the loons like Aaron Good and Eugenio, who are just embarrassing me.
Taibbi and Schellenberger.
Right. Elon Musk is not your friend. Although it's funny, did you see he's labeling NPR state-affiliated media now? Because, I was on RT recently, and I was like, oh, that's Russia state media. I was like, they should label all. They should label the New York Times, American state media, and the Washington Post, and, all these, Yeah. I love it. All these liberals are just agonizing over the anguish, the unprecedented indictment of Trump. The American people aren't all that agonized. Like 60% say, yeah, he should be indicted. The majorities of people think that this is a politically targeted indictment, but they also think that he should be indicted. So you can have both. You can say, yeah, they came after, but the guy did a lot of shit that was wrong. So
I think he rebels. I think he thinks he should be indicted because he got so much more attention and money out of it.
Well, he wanted a mugshot taken, and they wouldn't do it. So, but it doesn't matter. He just put a fake mugshot on like T-shirts and mugs. So the mugshot mug. I think we should do that.
We should do that.
We should do. Should we do mugshots? Like I wouldn't mind like Sinatra's. That's the best mugshot ever. Sinatra's mugshot. That's how you do a mugshot. Right?
Yeah.
That's the best mugshot ever.
My actual mugshots none of them are that glamorous, I got to say.
Oh yeah.
No.
Well, anyway. Conspiracy theory is a dead end. Don't do it. I'll do it.
Yeah, stay away. Just say no. Just say no.
Study the system. Study capitalists. Study the ruling class. There are differences in them. Just because there are differences doesn't mean that they're conspiratorial.
Yep.
Right?
Study the political economy.
I mean, the idea that somebody was out to get Kennedy is just preposterous. In fact, just for our listeners, viewers out there, our fans. This is the 60th anniversary. This year is the 60th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination. And so we will be doing a series of John F. Kennedy shows. This is kind of the year of Kennedy in a lot of ways. So we're going to be doing some stuff starting soon. Intermittently, we will be doing various shows on JFK, because that is one myth that is still very persistent. Even young people who don't really know anything about it kind of have this idea that they're, the kind of whole Camelot kind of thing. So we want to do our best to kind of tell people what was really going on there too. These fables of Kennedy,
Yep. Folks, you've been listening to the anti-conspiracy podcast known as the Green and Red Podcast on a scrappy Easter Sunday. If you like what you're hearing, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. This won't be on our audio platforms, but you should subscribe to us on your audio platforms and rate and review us. It helps us in the algorithms, as it helps us ride that algorithm wave. So much appreciation with that.
Share
it, rate and review us, do whatever it takes. We need your support.
How many times do people say, I need a new podcast, right? So you can recommend this to them, right?
Yep. Absolutely recommend us. And then if you really like us, go to our website, greenredpodcast.org, and hit that support button, become a donor or a recurring donor. You can also go to our Patreon and become a patron at patreon.com/greenredpodcast. And stay scrappy.
Good luck on your Easter egg hunts.
Good luck on your Easter egg hunts. Enjoy your spring equinox, whatever it is. We will talk to you again really soon.